The U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says all U.S. troops from northern Syria will not be going on home as earlier thought, but will be headed towards western Iraq. At least 1,000 soldiers are to be redeployed to help stop the resurgence of Islamic State, a main concern as Turkish forces deal with Kurds in northern Syria.
The announcement by the U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper comes as military vehicles carrying U.S. and Russian flags were seen in two towns in northern Syria. One video purportedly showed armored vehicles bearing U.S. flags moving near the northern Syria town of Sarin. Another video appeared to show Russian patrol near the city of Manbij, a key city to the west of Sarin. Syria's Russian-backed army entered Manbij after it was abandoned by U.S. forces. Mr. Esper says the U.S. troops could continue the campaign against the Islamic State and help defend Iraq.
I had a discussion last week with my French counterpart, and I had a conversation with the NATO Secretary General. We both agreed on the importance of continuing the Defeat ISIS campaign, and we agreed to have a meeting on it this week in Brussels. And so I think that's important. We plan on to continue that. And by the way, we're still in contact with the SDF on the ground as well, and they are still, as best we can determine and as best they report, defending the prisons that are in their area of control.
Mr. Esper was also in Afghanistan on Sunday, October 20, in a bid to bring talks with the Taliban back on track, after President Trump abruptly broke off negotiations last month, seeking to end America's longest war. His visit comes amid questions about America's commitment to allies after announcing a withdrawal of U.S. troops from northeastern Syria and the president's longtime desire to get out of foreign engagements. Meanwhile, a Kurdish-led force said it had withdrawn all its fighters from the besieged Syrian town of Ras al-Ain. Apparently, the start of a wider withdrawal under a U.S.-brokered temporary ceasefire agreement between Turkey and Kurdish fighters. Under the temporary ceasefire, the SDF has agreed to withdraw from an area of about 120 kilometers, stretching from Tal Abyad to Ras al-Ain, although Turkey wants to ultimately control a much larger area. The SDF had earlier accused Turkey of not allowing its fighters and wounded civilians to leave Ras al-Ain, and both sides accuse each other of breaching the truce. The Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says he expects the U.S. to keep its promises and not use stalling tactics in the ceasefire. The truce lasts 5 days to allow the Syrian Kurdish YPG militia to withdraw from a safe zone that Turkey aims to establish. He says the offensive will resume if the withdrawal is not complete within the 5 days. He has also promised to crush the heads of Kurdish militants in northern Syria if they do not withdraw from the area in the 120-hour period. In the meantime, Syrians in the northeast border town of Tel Abyad scramble for whatever aid they can get as aid workers hand out aid from trucks carrying the Turkish flag.
And finally on the program, will Brexit remain Brexit? And can the British Prime Minister pull through? The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson faces new impediments along the way as the Scottish Supreme Court will decide whether Mr. Johnson has fully complied with the law requiring him to ask for a Brexit delay.
The decision by the court stems from an unsigned letter Mr. Johnson sent to the European Union on Saturday, requesting a delay to Britain's exit from the continental bloc. Mr. Johnson added another note in which he explained that he did not want a deeply corrosive Brexit extension. He had previously said he would rather be dead in a ditch than ask for any extension to the October 31st deadline. But he was compelled by a law passed last month by opponents to send a letter to the bloc asking to push back the deadline to January 31, after lawmakers thwarted his attempt to pass his EU divorce deal on Saturday. In an extraordinary step that indicates the extent of the Brexit fever gripping the United Kingdom, Johnson sent an unsigned photocopy of the text that the law, known as the Ben Act, that forced him to write a letter in which Johnson said that he did not want an extension to Donald Tusk, the president of the European Council. The Scottish court was originally asked earlier this month to consider using nobile officium powers to request a Brexit extension on the Prime Minister's behalf, but the judges delayed a ruling until the political situation becomes clearer. Now, it would be asked to decide whether Mr. Johnson's latest action broke a promise not to frustrate the so-called Ben Act. One of the campaigners bringing the action, SNP MP Joanna Cherry, said the legal action had already been instrumental in forcing Mr. Johnson to send the request for an extension late on Saturday. She says she and her fellow campaigners would now seek to maintain the pressure on Mr. Johnson to keep his word by asking the judges to continue the case until later in the week. Passed in September this year, the Ben Act required Mr. Johnson to request a 3-month Brexit delay unless he could pass a deal or get MPs to approve a no-deal exit by October 19. Fearing he might find a way to circumvent this, campaigners sought to provide a safety net by asking Scotland's highest court to use nobile officium powers to write a letter on the Prime Minister's behalf if he failed to do so.
Order.
Meanwhile, on Monday, the UK Speaker of Parliament, John Bercow, told the government it could not again try to get a vote on Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Brexit deal because it was posing the same question to Parliament twice. Instead, Bercow said it could pursue the route of getting the legislation required for Britain's departure from the EU through Parliament first, rather than having a straight yes or no vote on the agreement.
In summary, today's motion is in substance the same as Saturday's motion, and the House has decided the matter. Today's circumstances are in substance the same as Saturday's circumstances. My ruling is therefore that the motion will not be debated today, as it would be repetitive and disorderly to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Even Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn mocked the Prime Minister for sending the Brexit delay letter.
The letter has, in fact, been sent. The request is not only legally necessary and prevents us crashing out of the EU with no deal, but the extension allows this House the space to scrutinise the Prime Minister's Brexit deal. I want to pay tribute to all those members who've worked hard to ensure a no-deal Brexit is ruled out, and I will continue to work across the House to ensure that this continues to be the case.
Meanwhile, the European Parliament's Brexit Steering Group advised MEPs on Monday not to vote on whether to approve the deal until it gets the full sign-off from the UK.
And this is where we end the program today. Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can catch up on all our episodes on youtube.com/channelsweb. Just go to the playlist and look for Diplomatic Channel. I am Amarachi Ubani. I'll see you next time.